Welcome back to Cruise Gurus. And today, Gurus?
Gurus.
Gurus?
No,
Gurus. And today we're going to focus on those times when we're going to hire a local driver that we just find when we get off the ship.
We don't always love doing the ship shore excursion. It's not just the price, but oftentimes we're looking for a more private experience so we can do what we want to do in the time frame that we want to do it in. And it's easier to do it if you're not with 49 other people on a bus sometimes. So that's part of why we would be doing a private excursion. And then the other reason we would be having to jump off the ship first thing and go find a driver is if we're in a small town where there's more people on the boat than live in the village or the city where we are, there's probably not a whole lot of excursions left by professionals who are offering it
there
online.
may have been only a handful of people doing that, and when you arrive on a ship that may have 1,500 to 3,000 or more passengers, those guys are probably booked.
Yeah, if they have an online presence, they got booked ahead of time. So there have been times where we've gotten off a ship and we've said, okay, worst case scenario, we're going to walk around the harbor, but let me go see what we can do.
And that is one of your superpowers. And so we want to talk to you about it and share some of the lessons and things we've learned. And I will say, this is not the part I enjoy. I enjoy the benefits of your superpower, but typically it's kind of a division of labor. We're arriving in port, I'm getting breakfast, I'm packing up my camera gear, and we've already talked about what we want to do that day. Jennifer and I have sat down and we said, you know, we want to go, these are the 3 or 4 things nearby that we'd like to go to that we need a driver to get to. We know that. I finish packing. Jennifer gets off the ship as early as she can, walks to the area where the drivers are, and what happens?
There's different ways that I do this, and I'm going to give you some real life examples to kind of show and share. The first way is, I'm going to use Reykjavik as an example. You get off the ship in Reykjavik and there's a huge taxi line there. And I got off the ship, the taxi line was quite full, but the line of people for the taxi line was even fuller. So I went up to one of the guides who was there to pick up local people, and I just said to him, I can't believe I've done this, but I don't have an excursion here in Reykjavik. Is there any way you can help me? Do you know anybody who would like to make a fare today? He made 4 or 5 phone calls, and lo and behold, a gentleman drives up, and he didn't get in the taxi line. He got in the private tour line, and he was for me. And the other guy directed, no, he's for her. You get out of the way. And we just got so lucky. So that was one way of doing it. And I think that's where, when you're in a city like Reykjavik, it's a capital city. It's not a huge city, though. And so when you have 1 or 2 ships in town, people are busy, and there's just not a lot in the offering. So that's one way. The next example I'm going to give you was in Molde, Norway. Molde's a city in Norway, but it's not one of the big cities. It's a smaller sister to Ålesund, I would say. So I got off the ship in Molde, and out on the main road in front of the port, I saw a taxi driving by, and I went out and hailed him like I would if I was in New York City trying to hail a taxi. And he pulled over, and I just said, how would you like a fare for the day? I would like to go do the Atlantic Road. And he said, you know that takes a long time. And I said, you tell me the price for the whole day. I need to be back by such and such a time. And for the record, we usually tell them we need to be back an hour earlier than we actually need to be back. And then later in the day, if things are going well, and we can stretch that to a half hour, but we will usually tell them an hour before we actually need to leave. And that worked out just great. We got him for the day, and he was fabulous. He took us not only on the Great Atlantic Road, he took us to lookouts, he took us to World War II monuments. He was terrific.
He was good.
The third way I have done this is, again, in Norway, in Ålesund, a little bigger city, and I think this is absolutely worth trying in any large city. Go to the nearest hotel, and most of these ports will have hotels pretty close to them. Go to the nearest hotel, and in Ålesund, the hotels all have a direct taxi line. And you literally just go into the lobby of the hotel, you pick up a telephone, and it's a direct line to taxi service. You tell them where you are, and they send a driver, and he was there within 7 minutes, I think. And same thing, we told him what we wanted to do. We wanted to do the Trollstigen, and he said the same. He said, that's a really long ways. And we said, we know, and you have a fare for the whole day. Tell us the price for that. He gave us a price, and we were great with it, and off we went. The fourth way...
And just in case people are watching and wondering, these are good fares. We have an idea of what we would pay for even a bus through the ship. Certainly much cheaper than any of those options.
Much cheaper.
And it's a private vehicle, but also what a private guy would. And so you're not paying New York City taxi rates to go 3 miles. No. It's a negotiated fee, and there's some bargaining involved, but we have gotten good and fair deals everywhere we've gone.
Well, and let's say that, we recognize we're the ones on vacation, we're the ones spending the money. We're not there to get a free ride. We are there to support their business. We want them to do well, and we want to have a good time. We know what we're willing to pay. And, I'm going to use the negotiation with Knut and Alesund, and he gave me a number, and I was like, oh, that was a little high. It's Norway. Everything is expensive in Norway. But I knocked it down by 50. I think I knocked it down by 100 euros. And he was like, oh, no, I just can't do that. And we settled at 50 euros. He came down and I came up. So that worked out just great.
Any other stories?
I do. I want
Port
to tell.
Stanley? Or?
Yeah, I wanted to do Port Stanley, exactly, because I think that's such a good example. Port Stanley is a tiny, tiny port in the Falkland Islands. Beautiful port, though, and there's some really great things to do. And what we knew we wanted to do, we wanted to go see king penguins. Unfortunately, king penguins are far, far away from the harbor where you're docked. And there's really, the buses from the ship will go out there, but they take a long road. The best way to do it is to go four-wheeling. And we got off that ship along with, I have to say, a whole bunch of our shipmates who also didn't have tours. But again, I'm first in the line. I get off and I go to the first guy I see, and I literally held his hands and said, I think you're meant for me. Can we go see king penguins today? And he says, how many are in your party? And we had, I think, 2 kids with us that year.
Did we?
Yeah, Max and Jenna.
Well, we had the whole group.
But only 2 of them wanted to go.
Okay.
So we had 2 kids and Jonathan and me. And he says...
And just, we hit a home run. This guy was very talkative. He had been there in the war, Argentinian invasion. He had stories about the occupation of his property. He was very knowledgeable. He knew the history of the island. He was proud of the island. It was just amazing. We did go four-wheeling. He had private access through some private property. Yeah. So we were able to get very close to the colony. He had private property access through some friends he knew. Was able to get us very close to the site. We spent the time out there seeing dozens of huge buses from the cruise ships that just full of people, had a very different private experience. And that will remain one of the most powerful experiences of my life. I think I still am bleeding internally from going out there in his Land Rover, the 4-wheel drive, because we were going across fields. That was very exciting. A couple of places where he would drive across boards in ravines, but he knew what he was doing.
We would have to get out, put the boards out across the ravine, and then take them off on the other side. Yeah.
But just a lovely man, a lovely experience. And you can say, well, you've been really lucky over the years. And I would say we have been very lucky, but we haven't had any bad experiences that way.
No, we've had such good experiences. And I want to give you a couple of tips. So my pro tips for making friends with taxi drivers on day one, or the only day you have. The first step, don't ever sit in the back seat. Make sure somebody is sitting in the front seat and ask.
That's a great
It's a game changer because it completely changes the dynamic. It's not you are driving me and I may sit in the back, as
Yeah.
you say, on your phone or.
I mean, you've had that experience in any major city with a regular taxi cab where you get in and the driver's got music going and he's not talking to you. You're looking at your phone and all that kind of stuff. We're not talking about that kind of experience. So
No.
one of us will sit up front and one will sit in back fiddling with his camera equipment, and we engage them because we haven't had a chance to get to know them like we would with a private prearranged guide. We will tell them about ourselves. We'll make it clear that we're content creators, that we're going to be filming. We're looking to stop and not just drive by things, that we're going to, if there's an opportunity to use a drone and get some drone footage, we want to do that. All those kind of things. But more importantly, I think we ask about them, their family, how long they've been there. And everybody's got a story. And we have made amazing friends, and they have become friends. And I say that because we've gone back to these places and we make a point of looking them up and using them. And actually some of them we stay in contact. They're sending pictures of their kids. We've met their kids.
I think the important part about having a driver that you make friends with is it does give you an opportunity to stay in touch. And I think, one of my favorite stories is with Canute, who we had hired in Ålesund more than once, is that the second time we met with him, one of the stops he made was at his house. And he took us to his garden, and we got to eat fresh strawberries out of his garden, and we got to see how he lives. If you can break down the barriers of language and of being strangers, these really are people, and this is part of that local experience. And you hear us talk about that on all of our channels, in all of our videos. If we can make friends, that's a win. And if we get some great views and some good activities, that's icing.
Yeah, I mean, literally, in the simplest terms, it's the difference between you're driving me and we're just in the back having our own experience. And no, we're doing something together. You're sharing your love. I appreciate your country, your culture. And I'm interested in you as a person. And yeah, that's a little bit of work. No, you don't do that every time you get in a cab. But when you're spending a day and that you spent a lot of money to be there in that location and you want to know everything you can about that place and culture, having somebody who's taking pride in showing you their life and experience, there's just nothing like that.
You talk about this. It's one of the stories you tell all the time, so I feel weird saying it. But we had another driver in Norway. We have spent a lot of time in Norway. But we had another driver in Norway that we did the same thing. I just found a driver and hired him for the day. And he was not local. He was not from Norway. He was from Eritrea. So Ate was one of those taxi drivers that I just got up early in the morning, went out and hailed a cab. And Ate is who I found. And we were especially excited because he was driving a Tesla, and we are electric car lovers. And so that was it just looked like a good fit. And he had a great price for us for the day.
But he was challenged because that wasn't his normal car. It was raining when we started out, and he could not get all the controls to work. So part of the problem was, as we were driving, the rain would stop and the windshield would get dry, but he couldn't turn the thing. So he was it was loud, and he was a little probably annoyed by it. He was a little off his game. But I think the story here is just that idea that we talked about maybe earlier in this video, that you can get in a car and look at your phone and the driver can ignore you. We asked questions about him and where he was from. And I think maybe at first he was a little hesitant to share, but once he got into it,
I think that he just warmed up and appreciated being able to tell his story, and we were so appreciative of the story that it just sort of really got things rolling. And I would say by the time we left, we had heard his entire immigration and refugee story coming from Eritrea. And he had also told us how he had integrated in his neighborhood, which was a fabulous part of acknowledging Norwegian culture and understanding that he was bringing something new and maybe something better to his neighborhood. He was winning over his neighbors one by making homemade food and dropping it off at their homes.
But there was one guy who was very reserved,
holdout,
and he still greets him every day, and he gets hello, or something. But he said, I'm going to win that guy over.
Absolutely. He says, we started with just a nod, and then we got some eye contact, and now he gets a hello. But he's positive that he's going to get to him the way he's gotten to all of the other neighbors, where they will actually enjoy meals together and that kind of thing. But he was such a penultimate story, a good story. And I think the other thing that I absolutely love is Jonathan is the introvert in our family, so we can appreciate a stoic Norwegian guy. And at the end of our day together, Ate was hugging Jonathan and really wanting to make that connection with us.
And we will see him again this year when we go. I want to make sure that we've covered the part of his story, though. As a refugee, when he came, he was extremely appreciative of the job that Norway has done to integrate people seeking asylum or just wanting to establish Norwegian citizenship. The great job that they did with him.
He had applied for asylum status because of the political unrest in his country and his family's connection to the opposition side. And he was granted asylum on his first attempt, and relatively, he was 18 years old, I think, when he applied. I mean, he was shocked that he was granted it so quickly. And he came to Norway and he was given housing, he was given an allowance, he was given language classes, and he was given help studying for his Norwegian citizenship exam. And all of those things he did in literally record time. He had 3 years in the system to get through all of these sort of stepping stones to citizenship, and he made them within a year. He also worked during that time. He went to the fish processing plants, which hard job, really a tough job. And he said, but I went in there knowing that I wanted to make my own way. Yeah. And he worked, he did his classes, he learned his language, he passed his language exam 2 years earlier than expected. And at the end of having passed his language exam and he'd gotten a job, he turned to the Norwegian government and said, I no longer need your assistance. I'm on my own. Here we go. He now owns his own taxi, and he owns his own home, and has actually, I think, maybe on his second home. He's maybe bought and sold a couple of homes, and is just one of those incredible success stories that any country would be glad to have this man as an immigrant. Yeah. I've never met anybody more proud.
So, and this is a travel channel for us, and I don't want to be too political, but I think there are some lessons there. I'm not going to try to connect all the dots for you, but we know that around the world there's a lot of debate about open borders and refugees and immigration and things like that. But clearly Norway is doing a lot of things right, and this is not a unique success story that we've heard, I think. So Ate, we're looking forward to seeing you in really just a couple of months, and we encourage you to reach out to your drivers and wherever they are, wherever they're from, and get to know them and let them get to know you. It'll improve your experience that day.
I'm going to say the last thing I want to finish with is we were going out to the Trollstigen that day, and he took us to all the sites along the way to the Trollstigen. We did the whole thing that we had anticipated doing. It is not the Trollstigen that I remember from that day. It is Ate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Trollstigen is fabulous, but that is not my memory of that day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Enjoy.
Thanks so much.